The big question is the return of the flip phone going to take hold in a serious way beyond that nation? And will we see flip phones from other phone makers like Apple, for example? Joining us for this discussion, Ramon Llamas, who is IDC Research Director for Mobile Devices and AR/VR. So, Ramon, are we all going to be holding flip phones a year from now? Or do you think that this is the sort of killer product that's going to convince wider adoption?
You know, I was listening to Dan talk here and listening to him say, yeah, I'm seeing this flip device all over the place in Korea. But guess what? That's Korea. If we spread this out worldwide and we take a look at that entire market, you're really just looking at that, foldables are accounting for about 1% of all smartphone shipments worldwide. And when you're looking at a market of about 1.2 billion smartphones being shipped each year, that's still a really small percentage. It's still a small number, but here's the good news. It's growing. Okay, but for now, I think it's going to be going towards a lot of niche segments instead before it reaches to that mass market. We still need some time.
Okay, but this price point, I think that took both Julie and I by surprise here as we were just sitting thinking about how much some purchasers out there are going to have to pony up at a time where we're already kind of thinking through where we're at within the phone or the kind of smartphone cycle for buyers out there.
Yeah, this is not an inexpensive device. Let's get that straight out. And again, this is really going to be for a very niche segment. And for me, that niche segment is going to be your smartphone power users, your, content creators, your, multitaskers, people who really live and die by their phone. Okay, and this is going to be seen as not really so much a nice to have and an interesting thing, but it's going to be a must-have type device. So, when you take a look at those price points of, $17.99, which for a lot of people is going to be out of reach, let's spread that cost out over, 36 months, which is what a lot of carriers and retailers are doing right here in the United States to make that just a little bit more palatable. Now, that's still going to be a lot of money. There's still a lot in terms of, monthly payments. But it's not, for everybody, it's not going to be all $17.99 up front.
Is Apple going to make one of these? Is Google going to make one of these? Who's going to make them stateside?
Let's talk about Apple for a minute because we get that question, pretty often. Apple, I don't see it happening now. I don't see it happening, in the near future. But take a look at what Apple does. Apple waits and takes a look at what happens in a market before it really makes a move and says, okay, we're going to join. And you've seen that before. If you remember back in 2007 with the first iPhone, when it just had about, a 3.7-inch screen, that was more or less the standard. It wasn't until, companies like Samsung came out with their phablet devices where you had, a 4-inch, 4.5, 5-inch, display. That Samsung said, that Apple said, yeah, you know what, that's something we're going to get into. Okay. And they did, and they have. And Google, actually, they just announced it, they at their own event back in May, that they're getting into it as well. You can actually get it on their website. So I think, if we look at Apple, it's going to be a wait and see because their strategy is, has been for a long time also. Stand on the shoulders of the giants that's come before them to prove that there is a market here for this. And then we'll look at it a little more seriously. And I think a lot of other vendors may be feeling the same way.
We've been keeping an eye on your smartphone shipment tracker as well. And for IDC, you had in the first quarter that we had a 14.6% drop in the first quarter of this year of smartphone shipments. Where are we at as we've moved through the second quarter and are now kind of looking at the forecast for the back half of this year too?
But the second quarter has always been a time of, kind of a lull in the action. I mean, first quarter is usually that, the coming down from that, very busy fourth quarter. So I'm not expecting, too much, growth taking place. I think as we get into, the second half, the third quarter and the fourth quarter of the year, by and large, those are going to be, the busiest times of that mobile phone market, coinciding, not surprisingly, with a lot of the new devices coming out. So, first, for us, I think we'd be, kind of conservative in terms of, what that, full year-over-year outlook is going to be. But when you get right down to it, 1.2 billion smartphones, There's still a lot of smartphones out there, and there's a lot of space for a lot of different vendors to play. The question is, which spaces do you want to play in? Look, with Samsung today, they're really cementing their position in that ultra high end of the market. Apple is also there, but you know what? That's a rare stratosphere for many other vendors. So let's wait and see what happens next.
Since you mentioned devices as a whole, do you consider a headset a mobile device? And where would that fall in your coverage? How does that kind of fit into this broader equation of where consumers are going to be engaging with devices as a whole?
I think with you mean a handset like a mobile phone? That'll be a mobile device. But if you're talking about headsets like AR and VR, these things have been, mostly stationary, like say, your Meta Quest 2 or what you saw with an Apple Vision Pro. But you know what? I think when we take a look at that kind of category specifically, it's still very early days as to what is taking place. Now, are you going to see people walking down the street with these devices on their heads? Probably not. But I would bet, in 5 years and in 10 years' time, these are probably going to become more ubiquitous and more commonly seen. So it's not just like one person, showing off to a bunch of friends. It's going to be a bunch of friends, getting together virtually to experience, a shared experience, whether it be watching a movie, watching a sports event, or watching some other major event. Let's just say something like, say, Samsung Unpacked, where you're not just seeing it on a two-dimensional screen, but you're actually sitting in the audience, you're sitting in the crowd, and you're getting that feeling of what it's like, to be there. Now, if I could just switch gears a little bit, for headsets, for these, it's these things are trailing far, far behind smartphones. We're still very much in early innings, so let's give it some time to grow up and mature.
Yeah, definitely. Until I can, comfortably have a silent disco with my friends somewhere with my headset, I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon. Ramon, thanks so much for taking the time here with us today. Ramon Llamas, who is the IDC Research Director for Mobile Devices and AR/VR. Appreciate it.
Thank you.